Hey everyone, if you are applying for jobs in federal resumes and if you think it's same as any other resume, you're wrong. Federal resumes are extremely different than other resumes in private sector. So we have Tammeca here who is an expert in federal resume and she's here to share some details, some tips, and also she's going to go through some sections of the resume of what to put in more details. So let's welcome Tammeca for the podcast and hear out some suggestions for federal jobs. All right. Thanks a lot for joining us, Tammeca. And I think your expertise in federal resumes is pretty unique for certified resume writers. So thank you for joining us the podcast. And we would like to know about why did you choose federal resumes? Like there are so many directions. I see a lot of certified resume writers. Why federal resumes?
So thank you so much first for having me, Akash. I appreciate the opportunity to share. So the federal resume process is very, very difficult. And so the biggest push for me was to be a resource for people who are interested in pursuing federal opportunities, but did not quite understand or under know how to navigate the whole process, or even where to even start in terms of pursuing federal opportunities. So that was the biggest push for me. It was a niche that in terms of a group of people that I really wanted to help and support to get to where they wanted to get to in their career.
I see. But thinking about specific like federal resumes, is it any different than a normal resume? Because in a typical resume, we have your personal details, your skills, your projects, and everything. How does it make any different with this federal resumes?
So with federal resumes, the biggest difference is that it requires a lot more details than your traditional private sector resume. So when you think about private sector resumes, typically it's about a 2-page document. Occasionally it may be 3 pages, depending if you're an executive level, so on and so forth. With federal resumes, because of the level of detail that is required, you're looking at 4 to 5 pages, and even sometimes even longer. I had social workers who I've written resumes for, federal resumes for, and their resumes have been upwards of 8 or 9 pages because of the number of, yes, because of the number of clinical hours and field experience and everything that they need to get to where they're getting in their careers. So you're looking at multiple jobs, multiple, sections with different descriptions and everything. And so it certainly can be up there, and typically, even though we're covering 10 to 15 years, someone like a social worker, in those, it may be 2 or 3 years, they can have, 3 or 4 different roles because they're trying to get those clinical hours in. So it definitely depends upon the position and the role, but you certainly can have several pages with federal resumes. And then the level of detail includes things like that you wouldn't typically put on a private sector resume. It includes things like salary for the job you're in, your supervisor's name and phone number, the full address of the company you're working for. So those are things you wouldn't typically include in a private sector resume. So it's very different indeed.
So that raises some more questions, like because I see that resumes should not be long. That's like a common notion or something. Keep it to 1 page, keep it to maximum 2 pages if you have more experience. But 7, 8 pages. How does ATS like it, and how does the recruiters like it? Is this what they expect in federal side?
Yeah, so with the federal process, there's not really an applicant tracking system. Resumes are read by human resources specialists. They have to read those resumes and they have a set of criteria that they are assessing to determine if you are a qualified candidate or the best qualified candidate to be referred to that hiring manager. There is an assessment, or what they call a self-assessment, which is a series of questions through an occupational or supplemental questionnaire. That is where you're rating yourself, and that does go through like a system, but it's just essentially is scoring your answers. but your resume, it's definitely read by a person. And what you want to do is the keywords are still important though, because your resume in the federal process is your full application. If you neglect to include specific details that the job posting is requesting, then the HR specialist will assume you don't have that experience. So, whereas private sector, they're going to make certain assumptions, right, about your background, your experience based on what you have. But in federal, no assumptions are made. It has to be explicitly included in your resume, or you could disqualify yourself.
Wow, that's a revelation because in the engineering sector, like a private sector, if somebody does not share about their basic skills, like a C programming or something, they automatically assume that this person might know this. But
Mhm.
looks like not in federal. You have to be specific to all the skills and the projects and everything you have done, right?
Yes. So yes, projects you can certainly include those and include the details. Like let's for instance use an IT person. When you're indicating your projects, it's always a great idea to say, what systems you use, what software you use, which applications you use for that particular project. Whereas, like in private sector, they probably will know, if you're applying for a specific role. So again, you have to be very explicit in federal resumes. And yes, they expect it to be long because they know that there's a certain level of detail that you have to cover. And that vacancy announcement or that job posting, it tells you everything you need to know and what you need to include in that federal resume.
What about the confidentiality for people who are not a first time applicants? Let's say I'm already in the federal job, and I believe a lot of things are confidential. And when you hop onto a different job, how do you suggest to maintain that in your cover letters or resume details?
Yeah, no one expects any confidential, top secret, so on and so forth information to be released. And so it's just all a play on words. If you go to different job postings, it'll give you the terminology that you should include in your federal resume. So it's just a matter of making sure you're pulling in the proper headlines, and then under each headline, you're pretty much giving them the details about what your work involved. So let's just take defense related work. You can say things like defense missions, things like that, national security. You're not divulging any details, but you letting them know that these are the types of positions that I was involved in, or the type of missions or projects I was involved in.
Oh, I see. I see. I think that clears up. But to look into a bit more practically, if you can share some more details about individual sections of the resume samples you may have, that would be really great.
Sure, I'll share my screen. I have a few snapshots that I can share.
Sure.
Um, okay, great. And so Um, what you see here is just a few snippets that I pulled from some of the various resumes that I've written over the years. So when I mention headline or heading, this is what I'm talking about. Typically, this information here is pulled directly from the job posting. And so it basically tells the HR specialist in this section of my resume, I am going to speak about my oral and written communication skills because that is a skill or competency that the vacancy announcement mentioned that is required. And that's something they're going to be looking for and scoring you on. And so in there and under that particular job, that's what you want to discuss. You want to make sure you add any matrix. I always say numbers, numbers, numbers. Wherever you can include numbers, make sure you include numbers. You want to talk about frequency, like here, weekly, we're talking about. You want to talk about who you're serving, what you're doing, how you're responding, or how you're writing, or what you're using. Here, they're talking about phone versus, in person and in writing inquiries. So again, you want to provide as much detail as possible. Here in my next one, for this particular position, for this candidate, they wanted more of the general office operations and the computer skills. And so in this particular example, you'll see I noted the different systems that they've used. which was relevant to that job. In this case, you're talking about the composite healthcare system, Alta. All these are Endears. These are all relevant systems for that particular vacancy announcement. So again, you pulling in that information that vacancy is referencing, and you're telling them how you used it, what you've done. Again, we pulling in numbers as much as we can, and then some of the other functions that was done in terms of administering the system or general office operations and so on and so forth. And then certainly accomplishments are always important as well. And you can certainly add a very detailed accomplishment. My accomplishment here is just more of a snapshot. It was for a lower level position. But here it again talks about this person being, recognized for their work in customer service, and which position this person applied for. Customer service was critical. And so it was important to know, wow, this person actually received 5 commendations in this particular job for why they delivered and maintained exceptional customer service, professionalism, and prompt responses during interactions with customers and colleagues. And that is very critical for customer service roles. So again, your accomplishments can be very detailed. You can get into, like, for instance, if you're highlighting a project, you can actually get into, mentioning that, these are the systems I use. I collaborated with X, Y, and Z during this project, and this is what our outcomes were as a result. So again, accomplishments are still critical. Matrix are still critical. So numbers, and then most importantly, a very high level of detail. And as you can see, these are extensive details, okay? Not just, 2 lines, 3 lines, very extensive details, and it's very necessary and very expected.
Right. Also, I think some of the federal resumes I've seen, they have initially about some job ID and some initial personal details, which we do not see usually in several resumes. What's that about?
The job ID. So that's typically how you find your federal jobs. So let's
Hmm.
just go over here real quick to USA Jobs. Okay, can you see my screen?
Uh,
Hold on, let
Not.
me stop
Yeah.
sharing and then let me reshare it. It doesn't switch over very nicely.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, can you see it now?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So when we go over to USA Jobs, you can search up here for a particular job title, or you can actually search for uh, if you have the vacancy ID, you can search for that as well. And so that's what that is. You don't necessarily have to reference it on the your resume. You certainly can. It won't hurt anything. But some of the other things you also want to make sure you have on your federal resume is your citizenship status, U.S. United States citizen. Also, if there's veterans preference, all of that information should be there. If you have a clearance, all of that information should be on your federal resume at the very top. You should always include your full address on a federal resume, as opposed to the private sector where we're more or less, truncating a little bit or being more selective in terms of geographic region. And definitely should not include LinkedIn and no active links. So your email should not be an active link. And then no LinkedIn links need to be included as well. So let's just go to, let's just pick a couple of human resources. I'm gonna just pick manager. And so here you can see there's over 1,200 jobs in human resources. This is all over the world. There could be jobs in other countries here as well. You can narrow it down based on if you are now, someone who's no longer or not employed by the federal government. Those are the jobs typically open to the public, open to any and everybody. So you can narrow it down that way. And you can also narrow it down by your geographic region. And so, for instance, if we go into this first row here, you have the right here, the announcement number here, which is just 167. So again, that's another way you can actually find job postings by having the announcement number. In this case, this is a little short. Typically, they're a lot longer, so this one may be a little bit more difficult to find if you just have the job announcement number. But typically, they have a lot longer numbers and very unique to those particular jobs. So, like here, for instance. Okay.
I see.
So
So
it's
do we need to put those specific job IDs in every resume we apply to? Is that how
you don't need to.
I need
You
to?
and what I was saying was you certainly can. It won't hurt anything, but you don't need to.
So while you shared your screen about the job searching over there, I saw like a COVID-19 requirement.
Hmm.
So what do you think about having the COVID-19 vaccination status in the resume, saying that yes, I am vaccinated with COVID-19, and do you think that's useful?
No. So here's one thing that people tend to forget. Um, COVID-19 is vaccination is really medical information. Okay. It's not something you want to disclose on your resume. Now, certainly later, um, when you get to a point where it's they need to know that information, say for instance you're offered a job and so on and so forth, then certainly you can say yes, I am vaccinated, blah blah blah, but that is definitely not something you need to disclose on your resume. And I definitely don't recommend wasting real estate on indicating if you're vaccinated or not.
So even if it's like a healthcare based where vaccination is mandated, and you still don't recommend to put in inside a resume, like.
Yeah, even if it's healthcare, no, you don't need to include it because you got to remember with some healthcare jobs, you have to have a whole slew of vaccinations, and so you're not going to list all your vaccinations on your resume because you're a nurse or applying for a nursing job. They will ask for that information in the process, and then that's when you can supply it. It definitely does not need to be on your resume.
I see. I see. Well, that clears a lot of things up. Anything else you would like to share as a key mistakes you think most people make in the federal resumes? And could you point out some of those, or is it depends on situation to situation?
Yeah, the biggest mistake is not including enough information. That is the biggest mistake people make. You have to be over communicative in a federal resume. Now, does that mean you're putting all this stuff in there or all your work history? No, it definitely does not mean you including all your work history. What it means is that you read the vacancy announcement and you make sure that you speak to every qualification that they're looking for in a high level of detail. And it's that simple. And it tells you what you need to have. It tells you need month, year, day, and in terms of your work experience, because that's critical because they have to calculate your years of experience. So if you don't put the month and even the day at times, then they don't know how much experience you have. So you're disqualifying yourself. So it's very important to read that vacancy announcement and most importantly, to adhere to everything that they're requesting and making sure all the information is clear in your resume.
Well, then why not have a LinkedIn profile in that? Because a LinkedIn in the end is just a summation of your skills and some experiences. So, what is there a concern of having a LinkedIn link in the resume for federal based?
To be honest, I think it's more of a security concern, but not only that, it's a potential for um, discrimination.
Oh,
Yeah, with LinkedIn being on the federal resume. And so they try to eliminate as much of that as possible. And so it's just a matter of, like I said, maybe the security preferences, but most importantly, making sure they're compliant in terms of sourcing their candidates.
wow. I think I can clearly say the federal resume story is so different in several angles. Like it doesn't care about ATS. It's manual. That's one thing I can see. And it's not about short. It's go long as long as possible, right? And don't put all these links like LinkedIn, etc., inside the resume. I think it's a lot different. Which clearly explains why you chose so uniquely in the federal resume part. So could you talk about your service, like how often do you have accept clients, and what areas would you help?
Yeah. So with my business, I actually help professionals as well as our transitioning military veterans and service members and their spouses land in the federal government. And I do that with by just, talking to them, making sure I capture all of their great relevant skills and assets that they have to offer. But most importantly, making sure that they understand that this is a targeted process. It's not a, oh, let me just create my generic federal resume. There's no such thing. So I make sure they understand that. And then we make sure we find opportunities that are relevant to what they want to do and where they want to go next in their career, and we make sure we create targeted resumes for that. And my business actually is Infinite Potential Resumes, and you can find me on all social media channels, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, as well as Instagram. And then
Okay.
I also have a website, infinitepotentialresumes.com.
Great. I hope people can reach out to you for extra detail and extra service, Tamika. And one last thing is, would you like to share like a one-line suggestion for the young minds who might be watching this?
So if you're new in your career, make sure you when you're looking for federal resumes, you include, especially if you're a new graduate, make sure you check off the box for recent graduates as well as students. Because what's great
Mhm.
about the federal resume is that although you may be a recent graduate, 2 years is recent graduate for federal jobs. So you can still
Oh, wow.
apply up into 2 years after you graduate. So there's a tidbit that people tend to neglect.
I see. Okay, I think that's a great tip. Great. I think thanks a lot for your time, Tamika. And
Thank
I think
you.
the key points we discussed is very straightforward and definitely helps people who are watching this video. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Have a great day and weekend.
Thank you. All right, everyone. Thank you for watching the podcast, and I hope the suggestions provided by Tamika are going to be useful for your federal based resume writing and job applications. If you would like to write great resumes and cover letters, go ahead to wisedoc.net and make sure you have a good resume before you apply for jobs. So, thank you for watching this. If you like more content like this one, please hit the subscribe button and like and share with your friends. Thank you so much.